Victoria Sterling sat in her sprawling California estate, the morning sun casting golden rays across her mahogany desk. At 63, she had built an empire that spanned television, publishing, and philanthropy. Her influence reached every corner of the globe. Her opinion could make or break careers, and her endorsement was worth millions. Yet today, she felt the weight of a decision that money couldn't solve. The ornate invitation lay before her, embossed with royal seals and written in elegant script. Prince Alexander and Isabella Reed Windsor requested her presence at the christening of their daughter, Princess Sophia. More importantly, they wanted her to serve as the child's godmother. Eleanor Gray, Victoria's assistant for over 2 decades, knocked softly before entering. "The palace is expecting your response today," she said quietly, noting the troubled expression on Victoria's face. Victoria had known Alexander since he was a teenager, had watched him grow from a rebellious prince into a man who dared to choose love over duty. When he married Isabella, a biracial actress from Los Angeles, Victoria had publicly supported their union. She had celebrated their courage to forge their own path, even as they faced criticism from traditionalists. But things had changed since then. The couple's recent decisions had created a storm of controversy. Their explosive television interview had divided public opinion. Their business ventures had raised eyebrows, and their constant legal battles with the media had painted them as opportunistic rather than noble. Victoria found herself questioning whether their actions aligned with her values of integrity and service. She walked to her floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the perfectly manicured gardens. In the distance, she could see the small chapel where she held her private spiritual ceremonies. It was there, in moments of quiet reflection, that she made her most important decisions. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her dear friend, Judge Patricia Williams, calling from Chicago. "Victoria, I heard about the invitation," Patricia said without preamble. "What are you thinking?" Victoria sighed deeply. "I'm torn, Patricia. I love Alexander like a nephew, and Isabella has tremendous potential for good. But I can't ignore what's happened these past few years." "You mean the interview?" "That's just the beginning. The constant conflicts, the legal battles, the way they've handled their exit from royal duties. I built my reputation on supporting causes and people who demonstrate integrity and service above self. I'm not sure they represent those values anymore." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "But what about the baby? She's innocent in all this." "That's what makes this so difficult," Victoria admitted. "Sophia didn't choose any of this. She deserves love, guidance, and protection. But being a godmother isn't just ceremonial. It's a sacred commitment to help shape a child's moral and spiritual development." Eleanor appeared in the doorway again, this time with Victoria's longtime spiritual advisor, Reverend Marcus Johnson. He had flown in from Chicago specifically for this conversation. "Victoria," Reverend Johnson said, his voice warm but serious, "I understand you're wrestling with a significant decision." She nodded, inviting him to sit in one of the leather chairs opposite her desk. "Marcus, you know how seriously I take spiritual commitments. When I agree to be someone's godmother, I'm promising to help guide their moral and ethical development. I'm committing to being a positive influence in their life. And you're concerned about the parents?" "I'm concerned about the environment this child will grow up in. The constant media attention, yes, but more than that, the pattern of behavior I've observed. The way they've handled their challenges seems more focused on personal gain than on service or healing." Reverend Johnson leaned forward. "Tell me about your relationship with Alexander." Victoria's expression softened. "I've known him since he was 16. He was lost then, struggling with his identity and his place in the world. He had such potential for good, such a genuine heart. When he met Isabella, I saw him become the man I always believed he could be. But now I see two people who had the platform and opportunity to create real change, to bridge divides and heal wounds. Instead, they've created more division." The interview wasn't about healing or understanding. It was about settling scores and making accusations. Eleanor had been quietly listening from her position by the door. "Ma'am," she said gently, "if I may, the deadline is in 3 hours. The palace needs your decision." Victoria stood and walked to her bookshelf, pulling out a worn copy of Maya Angelou's poetry. Maya had been her mentor and dear friend, someone who taught her that true power came from lifting others up, not tearing institutions down. Maya used to tell me, Victoria said, that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Alexander and Isabella have shown me who they are through their actions these past few years. Reverend Johnson stood as well. Victoria, what does your heart tell you? My heart tells me to protect that innocent baby. But my conscience tells me that I cannot, in good faith, make a commitment I'm not sure I can keep. If I believe their approach to life is fundamentally at odds with my values, how can I promise to guide their child? The room fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Victoria had made difficult decisions before. She had ended friendships over principles, turned down lucrative opportunities that didn't align with her values, and spoken truth to power even when it cost her. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text message. It's from Lord Pemberton, she said, reading. He's asking if you need more time. Victoria shook her head. No, I've made my decision. She walked to her desk and pulled out her personal stationery. With careful, deliberate strokes, she began to write her response. The weight of the pen felt heavier than usual, each word carefully chosen. As she wrote, Victoria thought about all the children she had mentored over the years. The scholarship recipients, the young people in her leadership programs, the kids she had informally guided through difficult times. In every case, she had been able to wholeheartedly support their growth because she believed in their potential and their environment. This situation felt different. She couldn't shake the feeling that agreeing to be Sophia's godmother would require her to compromise her principles. And Victoria Sterling had built her entire life and career on never compromising her core values. She sealed the letter in an envelope and handed it to Eleanor. Please have this delivered immediately. Reverend Johnson placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You're at peace with this decision? Victoria nodded slowly. I am. It doesn't feel good, but it feels right. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no, especially when saying yes would be dishonest. As Eleanor left to arrange delivery of the letter, Victoria returned to her window. In a few hours, the news would break. The media would have a field day analyzing her decision, speculating about rifts, and taking sides. But Victoria had learned long ago that she couldn't make decisions based on how others would react. She had made her choice based on her values, her conscience, and her understanding of what it truly meant to be a godparent. The consequences would unfold as they would, but she would face them with the clarity that comes from acting with integrity. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across her office as Victoria prepared for what she knew would be one of the most scrutinized decisions of her public life. But, in her heart, she felt the quiet peace that comes from staying true to yourself, even when that truth is difficult to bear. Part 2. The news broke at exactly 6 p.m. Pacific Time, just as Victoria had requested. Eleanor had coordinated with Victoria's longtime publicist, Sarah Chun, to release a carefully crafted statement that would minimize speculation while maintaining Victoria's privacy. Ms. Sterling has respectfully declined the invitation to serve as godmother to Princess Sophia. She wishes the family well and asks for privacy regarding this personal matter. Within minutes, Victoria's phone began ringing incessantly. Text messages flooded in from friends, colleagues, and journalists seeking comment. Eleanor had anticipated this and had already activated their crisis management protocol, directing all calls to the publicist's office. Victoria retreated to her private study, a sanctuary filled with first-edition books and photographs documenting her decades-long career. She poured herself a cup of chamomile tea and settled into her favorite reading chair, knowing the storm was just beginning. Sarah Chun called within the hour. Victoria, it's chaos out here. TMZ is running with a story about a devastating snub. The royal correspondents are calling it unprecedented. We need to decide how much you want to say. Nothing beyond the statement. Victoria replied firmly. This is a private family matter, and I won't contribute to the spectacle. But, even as she said it, Victoria knew her silence would only fuel more speculation. Social media was already exploding with theories about what had caused the apparent rift. Some blamed political differences. Others suggested it was about money or business deals gone wrong. Her phone buzzed with a text from her close friend, journalist Gail Marcus. V, are you okay? This is going to be huge. Do you want to talk? Victoria appreciated Gail's concern, but she wasn't ready to discuss her reasoning with anyone, even her closest friends. The decision was too fresh, too complex to reduce to sound bites or talking points. That evening, as Victoria tried to focus on reading, Eleanor knocked on her study door. "Ma'am, Prince Alexander is on line 1. He's calling from California." Victoria felt her stomach tighten. She had hoped to avoid direct confrontation, at least initially. But she had known this call would come. "Victoria," Alexander's voice was strained when she answered. "I need to understand what happened. We've been friends for years. Sophia is innocent in whatever issues you might have with Isabella and me." Victoria closed her eyes, choosing her words carefully. "Alexander, you're right. Sophia is innocent, and she deserves the very best. That's exactly why I made this decision. I don't understand. You've always been supportive of our family. I've been supportive of you as individuals," Victoria clarified. "But I can't ignore the pattern of choices you've made recently. Being a godparent isn't honorary, Alexander. It's a sacred responsibility to help guide a child's moral and spiritual development." There was a long pause before Alexander responded, his voice growing defensive. "So you're judging us? You think we're not fit parents? I think you're going through something that has led to decisions I can't support. The interview, the legal battles, the way you've handled your transition away from royal duties. I understand you felt you had to protect your family, but the approach has been more about revenge than healing. We told our truth, Victoria. We defended ourselves against lies and racism." Victoria felt the familiar weight of a difficult conversation. "Alexander, I believe you faced real challenges. I've never questioned that. But truth-telling and score-settling aren't the same thing." The interview felt more like the latter. Isabella's voice suddenly came on the line. Alexander had apparently put the call on speaker. "Victoria, with all due respect, you have no idea what we've been through. The isolation, the lack of support, the lies told about us, and our son. You're absolutely right, Isabella. I don't know what it's like to live in your shoes. But I do know what it's like to face public scrutiny and choose how to respond. I've seen people take the high road and the low road. I can only support the high road. And you think we took the low road?" Isabella's voice was sharp with hurt and anger. Victoria sighed deeply. "I think you took the understandable road. But that doesn't make it the right road. And it doesn't make it a road I can travel with you." Alexander's voice returned, quieter now. "So this is it. Years of friendship. Gone because you don't approve of how we protected our family. This isn't about our friendship, Alexander. This is about my ability to make a sacred commitment to your daughter. I take godparenthood seriously. I need to believe in the environment and values she'll be raised with. Right now, I have concerns about that." "What would it take?" Isabella asked suddenly. "What would we need to do for you to reconsider?" Victoria was quiet for a moment, surprised by the question. "Isabella, this isn't a negotiation or a test. This is about fundamental approaches to life and conflict. I need to see a genuine commitment to healing rather than fighting, to building rather than tearing down." "We are building," Alexander protested. "Our production company, our foundation work, our advocacy for mental health. Those are good things," Victoria acknowledged. "But they're happening alongside continued litigation, public disputes, and what appears to be a pattern of blaming others for your challenges. I need to see consistency between values and actions." The call grew quiet again. Victoria could hear muffled conversation in the background, Alexander and Isabella discussing something she couldn't make out. Finally, Isabella spoke again. "We're disappointed, Victoria. Deeply disappointed. But we respect your decision. I hope you understand it comes from a place of caring," Victoria said gently. "I want what's best for Sophia, and sometimes what's best requires difficult honesty." After the call ended, Victoria sat in her study feeling emotionally drained. She had hoped her letter would be sufficient, that a direct confrontation could be avoided. But she was glad they had talked. It confirmed her sense that they were still in a reactive mode, still feeling victimized rather than empowered. Eleanor appeared with a dinner tray. "Ma'am, you should eat something. It's been a long day." As Victoria picked at her salad, she reflected on the conversation. Alexander and Isabella weren't bad people. They had faced real challenges and genuine hardships. But they had responded to those challenges in ways that Victoria couldn't support or enable. Her phone buzzed with another text from Gail. The palace just released a statement saying they're saddened but respectful of your decision. Very diplomatic. Victoria wasn't surprised. The royal family had decades of experience managing public relations crises. They would handle this with their typical grace and formality. What worried Victoria more was the broader narrative that was already emerging on social media and in early news reports. She was being painted as either a principled truth-teller or a judgmental elitist, depending on the perspective. The nuanced reality of her decision was being lost in the rush to take sides. Sarah Chen called again around 9 p.m. Victoria, I've been monitoring the coverage. It's split along predictable lines. Alexander and Isabella's supporters are calling you a fair-weather friend. Their critics are praising you for taking a stand. Neither narrative is particularly accurate. That's exactly why I didn't want to make a public statement explaining my reasoning, Victoria replied. Complex decisions get reduced to simple narratives. Are you sure you don't want to do an interview? Maybe with Gail? Just to provide some context. Victoria considered it. She had built her career on honest communication, on helping people understand complex issues. But this felt different, more personal. Not now, she decided. Maybe never. Some decisions are meant to be private, even when they become public. As Victoria prepared for bed that night, she thought about baby Sophia, innocent and unaware of the controversy swirling around her christening. She wondered who Alexander and Isabella would choose as godmother now, and whether that person would face the same difficult questions Victoria had wrestled with. She also thought about the broader implications of her decision. In a world where loyalty often trumped principle, where friendships were expected to overcome fundamental disagreements, Victoria had chosen a different path. It wasn't a path that felt good, but it was a path that felt honest. And for Victoria Sterling, honesty had always been non-negotiable, even when it hurt. Part 3 the following morning brought an avalanche of media coverage that exceeded even Victoria's expectations. She woke to find #GodmotherGate trending on social media, with thousands of people debating her decision. The coverage ranged from thoughtful analysis to wild speculation, with very little middle ground. Eleanor arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and a thick folder of news clippings. Ma'am, it's bigger than we anticipated. The story has gone international. BBC, CNN, even newspapers in Australia are covering it. Victoria skimmed through the headlines. Media mogul's royal snub, Victoria Sterling's principled stand, friendship over, Sterling abandons royal couple. Each outlet was spinning the story to fit their existing narrative about Alexander, Isabella, and Victoria herself. Any word from the palace? Victoria asked. Lord Pemberton released a brief statement saying the family respects your decision and asked for privacy during this special time. Very diplomatic, as expected. Victoria's longtime friend and business partner, James Morrison, called from New York. Victoria, I'm getting calls from board members, investors, even advertisers. Everyone wants to know if this affects our business relationships. This was the aspect Victoria had dreaded most. Her personal decision was now being viewed through the lens of business implications. Several major brands had partnerships with both Victoria's media empire and with Alexander and Isabella's various ventures. James, this was a personal spiritual decision. It has nothing to do with business. I understand that, and you know I support you completely. But we need to be prepared for potential fallout. The streaming deal with their production company, the joint charity initiative, the book deal with Isabella's memoir. Victoria felt a knot forming in her stomach. She hadn't fully considered how her personal decision might impact existing business relationships. What are you recommending? For now, nothing. Let the dust settle. But we should probably prepare statements clarifying that this doesn't affect our professional relationships. After hanging up, Victoria realized she needed to reach out to someone who could provide perspective without agenda. She called her mentor, Dr. Maya Thompson, a renowned psychologist and spiritual counselor who had guided Victoria through many difficult decisions over the years. Maya, I need to talk through what I've done and make sure I'm not letting personal feelings cloud my judgment. Dr. Thompson had been following the story and was prepared for the call. Victoria, tell me about the moment you made the decision. What was the primary feeling or thought? Sadness, Victoria replied immediately. Deep sadness that it had come to this. But also clarity. I realized I couldn't make a commitment I wasn't sure I could keep with full integrity. And now? Any regret? Victoria considered the question carefully. No regret about the decision itself, but regret about the pain it's causing, the public spectacle, the way it's being used to further divide people into camps. That's not your responsibility, Victoria. You can't control how others interpret or use your decisions. You can only control the integrity of the decision itself. Dr. Thompson's words provided some comfort, but Victoria still felt the weight of unintended consequences. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Miss Sterling, this is Prince William. Might we have a brief conversation? Victoria was surprised. William, Alexander's older brother and heir to the throne, had maintained careful neutrality in the family disputes. His request for a conversation was unexpected. She called the number immediately. William answered on the first ring. Victoria, thank you for calling. I hope you understand this is somewhat delicate for me. Of course, William. I imagine you're in an impossible position. I am. But I wanted you to know that I understand your decision, even if I can't say so publicly. As someone who will someday face questions about godparents for my own children, I appreciate the seriousness with which you approached this commitment. Victoria felt a wave of relief. That means more than you know, William. I also wanted to ask a favor, though I have no right to do so. Alexander and Isabella are hurt and angry. Understandably so. But they're also isolated, and isolation tends to make people more reactive, not less. What are you suggesting? Nothing specific. Just, if there's ever an opportunity for private communication, for healing rather than public conflict, I hope you'll consider it. For Sophia's sake, if nothing else. Victoria appreciated William's diplomatic approach. I will always be open to genuine healing, William. But it has to be genuine. After the call, Victoria spent the afternoon in her garden, finding solace in the simple act of tending to her roses. Physical work helped her process complex emotions, and she needed clarity about her next steps. Eleanor found her there around 4 p.m. Ma'am, there's been a development. Isabella posted something on social media. Victoria's heart sank. Social media statements rarely helped complex situations. Eleanor read from her phone. While we're disappointed by recent events, we're focused on celebrating our daughter and the family and friends who choose to support us. Love wins. That's actually quite restrained, Victoria said, surprised. The comments are less restrained, Eleanor admitted. But Isabella herself seems to be taking the high road. Victoria felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps this could be handled with more grace than she had feared. That evening, Victoria received an unexpected visitor. Reverend Marcus Johnson had returned, this time accompanied by Bishop Sarah Williams, a mutual friend who had officiated at several high-profile weddings and christenings. Victoria, Bishop Williams said as they sat in the living room, I hope you don't mind my coming. Marcus thought it might be helpful to have someone with experience in these matters. I appreciate it, Sarah. I'll admit I'm second-guessing myself, not about the decision, but about how I handled it. Bishop Williams nodded thoughtfully. Godparenthood has become quite ceremonial in many families, but you're treating it as the serious spiritual commitment it originally was. That's admirable, even when it's difficult. But am I being too rigid? Too judgmental? Tell me this, Bishop Williams said. If Sophia were your biological granddaughter, and you had the same concerns about her environment, what would you do? Victoria thought about it. I would be actively involved in trying to create positive change. I would speak truth with love. I would be present, but not enabling. And, as a godmother with these concerns, I suppose I would do the same things. But I would have committed to doing them regardless of whether the parents listened or changed. Reverend Johnson leaned forward. So the question is whether you believe you could fulfill that commitment with integrity. That's exactly the question, Victoria confirmed. And I wasn't sure I could. Bishop Williams smiled gently. Victoria, you've been a spiritual mentor to countless people over the years. You've guided them through difficult times and celebrated their successes. Has your support ever been conditional on their perfect behavior? The question hit Victoria hard. No, never. If anything, I've been most present when people were struggling or making poor choices. So why would this be different? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Because this feels more personal. Because I feel like supporting them publicly right now would be seen as endorsing choices I can't endorse. But godparenthood isn't public endorsement, Bishop Williams said gently. It's private commitment. It's saying you'll be there for the child, regardless of what happens. Victoria felt something shift inside her. The conversation was helping her see dimensions of her decision she hadn't fully considered. Are you saying I made the wrong choice? She asked. I'm saying you made the choice that felt right at the time, based on your understanding of the commitment. But understanding can evolve. As her visitors prepared to leave, Bishop Williams left Victoria with a final thought. Pray about it, Victoria. Not about whether you were right or wrong, but about what love looks like in this situation going forward. After they left, Victoria sat in her study, contemplating Bishop Williams' words. She had made her decision based on principle and integrity. But had she also been influenced by pride, by a reluctance to be associated with controversy? She thought about baby Sophia again, about the commitment she had declined to make. And, for the first time since sending her letter, Victoria began to wonder if there might be a different path forward. Part 4. Victoria spent a sleepless night wrestling with the questions Bishop Williams had raised. By dawn, she had reached a conclusion that surprised even her. She needed to have a deeper, more honest conversation with Alexander and Isabella, away from the media glare and public pressure. She called Eleanor at 6 a.m. I need you to arrange a private meeting with Alexander and Isabella. Completely confidential. No staff, no publicity teams, no recordings. Just the three of us. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Ma'am, are you reconsidering your decision? I'm reconsidering my approach, Victoria clarified. I made my decision based on what I observed from a distance. Before it becomes final, I think I owe it to Sophia to have an honest conversation about what godparenthood could look like. Eleanor arranged for the meeting to take place that evening at Victoria's private retreat, a small cabin nestled in the Malibu hills that she used for meditation and private conversations. The location was known only to her closest friends and completely secure from media attention. Alexander and Isabella arrived at sunset, both looking tired and wary. The past week had clearly taken a toll on them. Victoria met them at the door herself, offering tea and asking them to sit by the fireplace. Thank you for coming, Victoria began. I know this is difficult, and I know you're both hurt and angry. We are, Isabella said directly. But we're also confused. We thought we knew you, Victoria. We thought you knew us. Victoria nodded. That's fair. And it's why I asked you here. I realized I made my decision based on public actions and media reports, but I never had an honest conversation with you about my concerns. Alexander leaned forward. What exactly are your concerns? Victoria took a deep breath. That you're both stuck in a reactive pattern that's preventing you from becoming who you could be. That your approach to conflict is creating more division rather than healing. And that raising Sophia in that environment might not serve her best interests. The words hung in the air for a moment before Isabella responded. You think we're bad parents? I think you're hurting parents, Victoria said gently. And I think the way you're processing that hurt is affecting your judgment and your choices. Alexander's defensive posture softened slightly. Victoria, you have no idea what it's like to be attacked constantly, to have every word twisted, every action criticized. You're right, I don't. But I do know what it's like to face criticism and choose how to respond. And I've watched you choose to respond with more conflict rather than rising above it. Isabella stood up and walked to the window. So what would you have us do? Say nothing when we're lied about? Accept racism and abuse in silence. I would have you speak truth without seeking revenge. Address wrongs without creating new ones. Use your platform to heal rather than to settle scores. Victoria paused, then continued more softly. The interview wasn't about healing, Isabella. It was about getting even. I understand why, but I can't support it. Alexander was quiet for several minutes before speaking. So what would it look like if you were Sophia's godmother? Would you constantly be judging our choices? This was the question Victoria had been grappling with since her conversation with Bishop Williams. If I were Sophia's godmother, my role would be to love her unconditionally and help guide her spiritual and moral development. That would sometimes mean disagreeing with you. yes. But it would also mean being present and supportive through difficulties. Even if you disapprove of our choices? Isabella asked, turning back to face Victoria. Even then, because my commitment would be to Sophia, not to you. The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Victoria could see both Alexander and Isabella processing her words, perhaps beginning to understand that her initial decision wasn't about rejection, but about the seriousness of the commitment. Isabella sat back down. Victoria, we're not perfect. We've made mistakes, acted out of hurt, probably been more reactive than we should have been. We all have, Victoria replied. The question is what we learn from those mistakes and how we grow. Alexander looked directly at Victoria. If you agreed to be Sophia's godmother, what would that look like practically? Would you be comfortable with our lifestyle, our choices, our conflicts? Victoria considered the question carefully. I would be committed to Sophia regardless of your choices. But I would also feel obligated to offer honest guidance when asked, and sometimes when not asked. I would want to help create an environment where she learns to handle conflict with grace, where she sees problems as opportunities for growth rather than excuses for revenge. And if we continued to disagree with that approach, then we would disagree. But I would still be present for Sophia. Isabella exchanged a long look with Alexander before speaking. Victoria, we've been thinking about what you said on the phone, about seeing consistency between values and actions. And maybe you're right that we've been so focused on defending ourselves that we've lost sight of what we're building toward. Alexander nodded. The constant legal battles, the public disputes, the feeling that we have to respond to every criticism. It's exhausting, and it's not who we want to be. Victoria felt a spark of hope. Who do you want to be? We want to be parents who raise a daughter who changes the world for the better, Isabella said. We want to be advocates for causes we believe in without getting caught up in personal vendettas. We want to build things rather than tear them down. Those are beautiful goals, Victoria said. What would it take to move in that direction? The conversation continued for another 2 hours, covering everything from their media strategy to their business decisions to their approach to family conflicts. Victoria found herself seeing Alexander and Isabella in a new light, not as the defensive, reactive couple she had observed from afar, but as two people genuinely wrestling with how to create positive change while protecting their family. As the evening wound down, Isabella asked the question Victoria had been anticipating. Would you reconsider being Sophia's godmother? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I need to think about everything we've discussed tonight. This conversation has helped me understand your perspective better, and it's clarified what my role could be. What do you need from us? Alexander asked. I need to see the consistency you talked about. Not perfection, but a genuine commitment to the values you just articulated. I need to believe that you're moving toward building rather than fighting. They agreed to give Victoria a week to consider, and to use that week to demonstrate their commitment to the approach they had discussed. As Alexander and Isabella prepared to leave, Isabella turned back to Victoria. Whatever you decide, thank you for this conversation. It helped us see ourselves more clearly. After they left, Victoria sat by the dying fire, feeling more hopeful than she had in weeks. The couple who had visited her tonight was different from the one she had observed in media interviews and public statements. They were more reflective, more open to growth, more focused on their daughter's future than on their past grievances. But Victoria also knew that one conversation didn't represent permanent change. She would need to see evidence that this new perspective would translate into different choices and actions. As she drove back to her main house, Victoria realized that her decision about godparenthood had evolved from a simple yes or no to something more nuanced. The question was no longer whether Alexander and Isabella were perfect, but whether they were growing and whether she could support that growth while staying true to her values. The answer to that question would determine not just Sophia's christening, but the future of relationships that had shaped Victoria's life for over a decade. Part 5. The week that followed Victoria's private meeting with Alexander and Isabella became a period of careful observation and quiet transformation. Victoria didn't announce her reconsideration publicly, but she watched closely as the couple seemed to shift their approach to both public and private matters. The first sign came 3 days after their meeting. Instead of releasing a defensive statement about a critical news article, Alexander and Isabella chose silence. When pressed by their publicist to respond to what she called unfair characterizations, Isabella reportedly said, "We're focused on what we're building, not what others are tearing down." Victoria learned about this from Sarah Chun, who had industry contacts close to the couple's media team. "It's interesting, Victoria. They seem to be deliberately choosing a different strategy." Even more telling was a call Victoria received from Dr. Amanda Foster, the director of a children's mental health charity that Alexander and Isabella supported. "Victoria, I don't know what you said to them, but Alexander called me yesterday with a completely different approach to their involvement with our organization." "How so?" "Before, they wanted to be the face of everything, to speak at every event, to have their story be central to our messaging. Now Alexander is asking how they can support our work behind the scenes, how they can use their resources to amplify our existing programs rather than create new ones around themselves." Victoria felt a cautious optimism. This suggested the kind of service-first approach she had hoped to see. The most significant moment came on Friday, when Victoria received an unexpected call from Alexander's older brother, William. "Victoria, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "Whatever you said to Alexander seems to have shifted something. He called me yesterday for the first time in months, not to complain or seek support for a conflict, but to ask advice about being a father." Victoria felt her heart lift. "What did you discuss?" "How to raise children who understand their privilege and use it responsibly. How to handle media attention in a way that protects them, but doesn't isolate them from the world." He seemed genuinely focused on Sophia's future rather than their past grievances. That evening, Victoria made her decision. She called Alexander and Isabella and asked them to meet her again, this time at her main house. When they arrived, Victoria noticed something different about their demeanor. They seemed calmer, more centered, less defensive. Isabella was carrying a small photo of Sophia, and Alexander appeared more relaxed than she had seen him in years. "I've been watching," Victoria said without preamble, "and I've been impressed by the choices you've made this week." What happens when the world's most influential woman must choose between loyalty and principle? When Victoria Sterling, the media queen who built an empire on truth and authenticity, receives an unexpected request that could change everything she stands for, the decision she makes will shock the world and reveal the real cost of staying true to yourself.